I'm going to call the Shelton City Council meeting for April 2nd, 2019 to order. Please rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Donna, would you call the roll, please?
Yes, I will. Councilmember Dorsey.
Here.
Councilmember Onesco.
Here.
Councilmember Kranz.
Present.
Mayor Rogers.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Peterson.
Here.
Councilmember McDowell.
Present.
Councilmember Schmidt.
Here.
Donna? Okay, we'll have one slight change to the agenda. The second general public comment did not get on the official agenda, so that will be inserted between action agenda and administration reports like we've been doing lately. So, everyone okay with that? All right, thank you. Okay, first order of business, our council reports. I'll start with Councilmember Dorsey, please.
All right, this has been a pretty quiet couple weeks, but other than my normal briefings with Jeff, the staff briefings, that's about it. I have a meeting coming up with Mason Transit Association again, and looking forward to a budget retreat at the end of the month on the 26th.
Quiet for me as well. I had a Housing Behavioral Health Advisory Board meeting and our briefings, and I have a special Housing Behavioral Advisory meeting on the 7th.
Councilmember Cron?
I've been on vacation for a while, but I did attend all my staff briefings and meeting with citizens, talking to them about the progress on the roads, and that completes my report.
Okay, thank you. I attended a Crossroads Housing Board meeting last week, and we'll be attending a Mason County Housing Authority meeting tomorrow. And been also a quiet week, except for upcoming retreats that are coming up at the end of the month. Deputy Mayor.
The only additional item I have is that Peninsula Regional Transportation Organization, of which we are a member, and I sit on that board, is looking at changing its administrator from WashDOT to Kitsap County, and so we're working through the new ILA and some bylaws changes and some other projects. So I'm coordinating with staff to make sure that we are moving through that process.
Councilmember McDowell.
I kind of had a quiet couple weeks. I had my Board of Health last Tuesday, Memorial Hall last Wednesday, briefings with the city manager. This morning I had my left board, which is law enforcement officers and firefighters, and we pay their medical bills for them after they're retired. And I'm going to be gone for a few days and be back next week.
Councilmember Schmidt.
Good evening. In addition to staff briefings, a couple of constituent meetings, that is my report
Okay,
this week.
thanks, sir. Okay, next we have a period of general public comment. This is for things that are not on the agenda. We'll have comment period for those later. So if you could hand in a card to Donna, if you have not already. Seeing none for the first period. We have
I do have one.
Okay.
Josh Reese.
Oh,
Thank you. I'm casual, just came from work, but I have an issue that I wanted to bring to the council.
Excuse me, can you state whether or not you're a city resident?
I am, yeah. I've been a city resident my whole life. I grew up here, and there's been some stuff been going on in my neighborhood that I want to bring up to the council. In September, my work truck was parked in front of my home and was struck by a DUI driver. If my truck wasn't parked there, he would have, excuse me, he would have gone through and may have killed my family. So the reason it's such a big deal for me and I get kind of emotional is I live on Adams Street, and most of the time that the DUI drivers that are straight, I've lost 5 cars since I was 16 to DUI drivers. There's a club just down the road that is, it's right by the Royal Shanghai. I don't know the name of it, but they are releasing drivers that are way over the legal limit constantly. They're on our roads. In fact, Saturday I got behind one He went up into where the PUD switch place is, up in Olympic Highway. He was driving erratically. He tried to go through Oil Ken Henry's parking lot. I called the Shelton Police Department. They were able to respond. They can't do anything as far as the jail being full. They couldn't, I mean, they released the guy that was stumbling down the road because there's nothing for them to do. But there's got to be something that we can do as a community, maybe have a little bit more patrol up there, to do something where someone's going to die, and we have to do something before that happens. So, thank you for having me. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Thank you, Josh, very much. So,
I have a card for Chris Burke, but Chris, I don't know if you're general public comment or tiny homes? It'd be for tiny homes. Okay.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you, Chris. Okay, so that's it for the first period of general public comments. We'll move on.
Mr. Mayor?
Oh,
Yeah. You have,
Mike Olson, would you like to be now or the later general public comment? Okay, Mike Olson, come on up.
did you want to go the second period?
No,
Okay.
I'll do it now.
Okay.
I didn't want to tie it into that so much. Mike Olson, I'm a city resident, thank you. I have followed the tiny home thing, and the one thing I want to mention that I've taken away from it is the incredible dedication and outpouring of compassion that the community has for veterans. So with saying that, another fellow Vietnam veteran and myself by the name of Mike Fredson and I have decided on a plan of action to build a Veterans Memorial Boardwalk. And I know you've been briefed real briefly about it, so I won't take up a lot of time with that, and perhaps in 2 weeks, if you'd like, I can come back and give you some more information. For decades, through several wars, military veterans have returned from national service to rebuild their lives and contribute to the communities by having families, by working as farmers, loggers, teachers, businessmen, and mill workers. Mason County is home to 7,700 veterans. For the most part, they have returned without any real recognition, yet have made the communities they return to stronger. Some veterans, though, never could find their way home. This Veterans Memorial Boardwalk will, we hope, offer a path for self-forgiveness and a way back home one step at a time. Creating an immediate positive impact on downtown Shelton, the 700-foot raised Veterans Memorial Boardwalk will honor generations of Mason County veterans who have served their nation's call. Located beside the historic Pear Orchard, the Veterans Memorial Boardwalk presents a strong icon of civic pride at a key entryway to the downtown business core. Supported by a new Mason Transit park and ride and other landscaping improvements, the boardwalk will provide a welcoming presence and bridge-like connection for transit riders, visitors, and most of all, American veterans to walk with pride along Mason County's only veteran memorial boardwalk built with local materials, donations, and labor. We're just now launching this publicly, and we'll be doing, of course, asking for money from everybody. And along with that, we will be having plaques made out of granite, engraved plaques to be embedded in the boardwalk. And I can flesh that out more if you guys would like down the road. I have some brochures that I'll pass out to everyone. And you can read them over, and in a couple of weeks, if you'd like me to come back, I can certainly do that, and we can get into it a little bit more.
Is this past and present veterans?
Any veteran that served Mason County and the city of Shelton and they even have records of the Spanish-American War at the museum. So any relative or anything like that, it's open to everything. I think the brochure will help explain a lot of it, so if I can, I'll pass these out to everybody.
Thank you.
thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Okay, thank you, Donna. Okay, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as published?
I move to approve the consent agenda as published.
Second?
Okay, there's a motion to approve the consent agenda as published. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, there are no business agenda items tonight. So we'll move on to our first action agenda item. It's a tiny home veterans lease. City Manager Jeff Knighton is going to speak to us about the lease for tiny homes for veterans.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, members of council, and members of the public. For several months, the city council has had open meetings discussing the potential to establish a tiny home village within the city of Shelton. We did hold a public hearing on this matter at our last meeting on March 19th, and there were a couple of changes from that initial lease. We wanted to clarify a few things. The first was that the lease is for a 30-year period, but the initial payment, $5,000 per year payment, starts in the second year for a total of $145,000 over the life of the lease. There are a maximum of 30 tiny homes on the subject property, and any additional homes that may be requested in the future would have to come back to council for approval. So we clarified that in this draft. And we also included the actual acreage of the property. One thing that has come back, you can see we have a little bit clearer picture this time. One thing that has come back is that red line at the corner there. Just a slight bit of additional property in order to accommodate potential stormwater on site, which is required as part of the development. What we can do with that, assuming council is in favor of the proposal, is bring the amended legal description back to you as part of a consent agenda item to get that fully incorporated into the agreement. And we'll be able to do that soon. The project proponent is in the middle of drawing up a new legal description and those elements in order to incorporate it into the agreement, but we didn't have it prepared for tonight. Other than that, there are no changes from what was proposed at our public hearing at the last meeting. A couple of things I wanted to mention, if there are any questions that the city receives during public testimony, I'll be happy to answer those after the testimony is concluded. We heard the concerns of the citizens after our last meeting, and we did provide additional seating and a television out in the Civic Center. We don't have near as large a crowd tonight, but that's a lesson that we learned going forward, and that's something that we'll endeavor to do if we have a meeting like we had last time on March 19th. And lastly, we wanted to make sure that that site was designed so that the potential access to that would not be directly across from Holly Lane, although that is up to the final design and up to the hearings examiner through that public hearing process. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have now, or we can wait till the conclusion of testimony tonight.
Any questions for Jeff, or do you want to delay?
Wait.
Okay. All right, so we'll open it up for public comment.
First is Louis Cofoni.
Good evening.
Evening.
My name is Louis Cofoni. I will talk fast by East Coast accent so I can get everything in 3 minutes. Otherwise, I won't be able to. First of all, before I say anything, I'm going to preface what I'm about to say with vets. I love the vets. The guy I called Pop, my father-in-law, I always call him Pop, not father-in-law. He served in the South Pacific in a foxhole with another buddy of his. My Uncle Salvatore flew in a B-17 in the Army Air Corps, not Air Force, Air Corps, and his plane got shot up off Germany. My Uncle Ulrich was in the U.S. Navy, participated in D-Day, Omaha Beach. He ferried troops in and out with supplies. Having said that, let me continue on. I'm curious about Panza. I think that's how you pronounce it. It said, these articles I've been reading in the journal, thanks to Gordon Weeks, he's very good. It says here they could come back and ask the city for more homes, more houses. I'm concerned about that. If Panza takes money from the state, which they say they will, that means they could Shelton could be forced to take homeless people from Seattle and other areas and vets from other parts of this state, which isn't what they say they want to do. I'd like to know who will vet the vets to make sure that they are eligible. Is Lena Ships going to vet the vets if they're eligible for the buildings? And to finish off my presentation, I want to tell you a little story about what happened to me up in Fred Meyer's. I come out of the store, and I was pushing the shopping cart back to the shopping corral. This person, I can't say man, that person, he started walking towards me rather quickly and slurring his words. He wanted to know if I had any money so he could get a bus ride back to Olympia. With that, I used a four-letter word which he didn't like. I said, yeah, get some work and you could afford a bus ticket. Well, he didn't like that, so he walked off and grumbled to himself or whatever. But I don't want that to happen to our wives, girlfriends, or other females of our family, to be accosted by people from other parts of the area because they're too daggone lazy to get a job. Are there any questions? If not, I conclude.
Perfect.
Wow, nice timing.
Thank you, Louis.
Thank you, right on time.
Thank you.
Next is Reverend Deacon Barbara Wiesa.
Just going to remind, 3-minute limit, and please identify yourself and whether you're a Shelton resident, please.
Mr. Mayor and members of the council, thank you for this opportunity. My name is Reverend Deacon Barbara Wiesa, and I am a Shelton resident. And I am a neighbor of where this proposed site is, this building project is to be put. I'm also the executive director and case manager at Community Lifeline and an ordained vocational deacon in the Diocese of Olympia. I'm also the granddaughter, daughter, niece, sister-in-law, and cousin of many veterans. Community Lifeline provides meals, showers, and hygiene items, case management services, job training, and the only shelter in Mason County for adult individuals. Since November 1st, our low-impact 35-bed capacity shelter has provided approximately 5,425 beds to unsheltered individual adults, with 10 to 15% of those self-identifying as veterans on any given month of varying ages and stages. And we also suspect through conversations and relationship building that there are many that do not self-identify. Our trauma-informed approach to programs is based on evidence-based research that all who walk through our doors have had trauma in their lives, including our veterans who may have experienced some of the worst, and we strive to welcome for radical hospitality and not marginalize or traumatize those that suffer it again and again on any given day, living on the streets or in substandard living conditions. Each person checking into our shelter interfaces with the case manager for an intake, needs assessment, resource referral, and person-centered housing plan. And each guest is entered into the homelessness management information system database and coordinated entry for housing resources. Trust and development relationship building are key components to engaging people into services. As a case manager, I am expected to find everyone coming through our doors housing. Currently, Shelton has very little housing and only one unit for veteran housing. And my veterans tell me they don't make us feel very welcome here in Shelton. And I was touched by the words of 2 uniformed Vietnam-era veterans at the last hearing who walked out of the meeting and stood in the hallway almost in tears as they spoke to each other. This feels like the rejection we got when we returned from Vietnam. I support this project and urge you to consider the message being sent to our single veterans choosing to come home from active duty and live in Shelton because this is where they were raised. Welcome home, veterans, and thank you for your service.
Thank you, Barb.
Thank you.
Tom Davis.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members, and thank you for this opportunity to speak. I've been carrying around these documents here for about close to a year and a half, and this is the short version. The big version is at home in my filing cabinet, and I've had an opportunity again to go through this for about the last 16 months or so on, and each time we have a discussion with the city. And each time we have a discussion amongst ourselves, and by ourselves I mean Panza. I'm part of that team, but I speak only for the veterans component. I don't find anywhere in here where the site that we're proposing is less than 6.3 acres. The site that is currently being proposed is 2.9 acres, give or take a tenth. This particular site is in I believe the far northern reaches of that particular lot, and my understanding is that the reason for that is twofold. One is to move it away from Christmas Village, which practically speaking makes very little sense. Although you could have the ingress and egress further north, there's nothing wrong with that to solve the problem, so you wouldn't be directly across from a Holly Road in Christmas Village. And the other was that there's an abandoned well on the property, All of a sudden, this well has become significant, where prior to this, it wasn't significant at all. And whether it's used in the impervious surface or the pervious surface, that could be worked around. So that's not really a very good reason to move us all the way to the northern end of this site, where that particular mound that has been there, material's been there for 20-odd years. I am glad, I am very happy and very appreciative that we've gotten to this point. But like another incident that I had with the county on a similar project, at the 11th hour, the county shot themselves in the foot there as far as the effectiveness of the project was concerned. And I'm afraid that's going to happen here. We need that room. There is no room in this designated site of 2.9 acres for any growth or any amenities other than squeezing these 30 houses into a very small spot. This was our original site plan. As you can see, it's comprehensive, it's attractive, there's 15 feet between the buildings. This is our new site plan. This is more like a detention center than a village. I believe in compromising, but I do not believe in capitulation. I would love to see this approved, but approve it with the original 6.3 acres, not with the 2.9 acres that is currently under consideration. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Tom.
J.C. Osterberg.
Good evening, council members, mayor, and city staff. I'm the executive director of Coyote Communities, as most of you know by now. My name is J.C. Osterberg, and I just wanted to say first off, thank you all for all of your work and your really hard and good questions and research and your time on this project. It's really clear that the council wants what's best for their citizens, and I appreciate all of your work and your ideas on this project. So thank you. Creating a veterans village would be extremely integral to each and every individual that lives there. They will have access to supportive staff that will use a holistic approach to their overall well-being. Right now in Olympia, we have many different resources that are available, which we're going to be having in Shelton as well. Things such as education, treatment with substance abuse or recovery and help with that, helping people with their physical health, mental health, their benefits, employment, kind of you name it. Our case managers and volunteers and resident advocates are there to help people on their way of healing. But on top of that, this will be a place that will let our vets heal. I urge you to vote yes on this lease and can promise we will take the utmost care of this project. Let's show everyone how Shelton cares about its most vulnerable community members and let them know that people can truly heal and become a strong part of their community again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chris Burke.
Excuse my attire, I just came from Chris Burke, and I'm not a resident of the city, but of Shelton. Okay, so yes, just from work, I look like a working man, but anyway, I do have some comments and some concerns. First off, I don't like the location. I think that our veterans would be, I think it would be better if they were in another area that wasn't so busy. With Christmas Village, Shelton Health and Rehab, Alpine Way, schools, future YMCA. I think that it's too congested. I think that if it was in another place, you know, I look at the homeless shelter downtown, what they did with their apartment complex that they built not too long ago. And it's not right in the middle of everything going on. It's in a quieter area of town where these veterans may not be overwhelmed. I think that with some of the veterans who have problems with PTSD, alcoholism, other things, that it would be better if they had a quieter place in our community, although I am for this. The non-veteran issue, you know, I tried to get in here on the 19th of last month, and I was at the back doors. I couldn't get in, and I just left frustrated because I couldn't hear anything, couldn't see anything. So I don't know what all went on there. I didn't look up the meeting later like I should have. But the non-veterans, I don't agree with that, and I don't think that they should be allowed to be in this program. The veterans have done a lot for us, and I think that we owe them a lot. I don't think that we owe the homeless in general anything. And so, like the last gentleman said, you know, go get a job. I think that there's a lot of truth to that. I'm trying to avoid something like the Mason County or Mason Transit downtown. Ever since that came in downtown, Shelton has not been as friendly of a place, in my opinion. I work downtown a lot. I'm a local contractor. I see people walking around all the time. There are fights in the businesses around here, not in, but in the lawns, and drug abuse. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chris.
That's all, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Donna. All right, well, ends public comment. Do you want to get a motion on the floor, and then we'll have further discussion and questions?
I move to accept the lease as presented.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Discussion, please. Who'd like to start?
I have a couple questions here
Or question?
still, but I think Joe wants to.
Go for it.
Well, so, however, the lessee shall prioritize homeless veterans residing in Mason County in the admissions process. Weren't we gonna go Shelton, then Mason County? And then, if open residential placements remain after admitting homeless veterans residing in Mason County, lessee shall prioritize homeless veterans from other counties. Can we specifically say what those counties are? We're gonna do the surrounding counties, but this just says counties, which could be clear down in the corner of Washington, you know, the state of Washington.
We can. That was a specific discussion at council of March 19th, and
Right.
what I had heard is that in order to not be unduly burdensome, we would just keep it at Mason County as the priority, and then other counties in Washington State.
That's my recollection.
That's my recollection too. We had a
Is the direct,
discussion
yeah.
about the nature of the population, and I think our discussion was specifying additional counties is probably not real constructive.
Okay.
That's my recollection.
So,
And
Mine as well.
I'll just make, the city of Shelton was in there, and I saw that was removed, and I didn't have a issue with that, because I think realistically, it doesn't make any difference. We're not gonna have that many people actually reside in the city of Shelton. It's gonna be Mason County anyway.
Okay.
So that was my personal pass on that.
well, then there's an eviction issue too. How do you evict them when needed? Are you under the tenant renter? So that's really hard to evict a person under the tenant renter clause.
Going to direct to staff
Oh,
on
I'm
that, or
sorry.
to John probably.
Yeah, so that, the tenant renter clause I can answer. One of the provisions, or I can ask John to answer. One of the provisions is that they maintain the recovery model, basically, of housing, and if they're not able to maintain that, then they will be asked to leave. As far as the, they meaning the residents. As far as the actual process and how that works, I would defer to our city attorney on that.
I mean, the lease doesn't spell out any provisions governing that process. That's something that we would leave up to them. And I would actually recommend that we keep it that way. It would be a lot of work for the city to essentially oversee Quixote Community's tenant practices. I mean, if you would like, we can investigate further and see how they sort of handle that. I mean, they've provided examples of how they operate Quixote Communities and how they sort of handle the sort of tenancy issues there, and I would imagine that they would adopt similar policies here. But if you're asking, you know, how does someone get kicked out, that's not something that I know off the top of my head, because that's something that throughout this process, I've sort of expected that that's something that is going to be handled by them and not us.
Okay.
Kathy, can I share the,
Yeah.
anybody else? And then we'll get back to you.
Yeah, I'm done.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
done, for now.
Can we quickly address the person that said this would be other than veterans? Because to my recollection, it's not going to be
Yeah,
other than
that's just not true.
Okay.
The lease very explicitly says that only veterans are going to be allowed to reside here.
Yep.
If Ponza or Quixote Communities allowed a non-veteran to reside there, they would be in violation of the lease, and we would be able to terminate. So that's the way the lease is currently worded. It does not allow them to rent any housing unit to a non-veteran.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Jeff, I want to, you know, as far as looking for other veterans throughout the state, I just think that's pretty broad. I find it hard to believe that we're going to have to go much farther than Thurston County, because I've heard there's a waiting list over there, and granted, they're not all veterans probably, but to put it out, you know, to Spokane, and, you know, I think that's just a little too far, but neighboring counties, I think, would be, in my opinion, I think we're going to have, you know, I think there'd be plenty of veterans to fill that up. But I guess that's a question for Ponza.
If the council would like to make that change, the full council would like to make that change, they can certainly direct us to do so. And should the direction be to approve the lease, they can direct us to approve that, or you can direct us to approve that with that change in place.
Okay. So should we stay on that, because that was similar discussion to what we had 2 weeks ago about prioritizing counties. Councilmember Crumbs?
Well, I think in our conversations, it's all good conversation. I think I could agree with Mr. Dorsey on this, that I would obviously put Mason County first, and then neighboring county second, and then for Ponza, they have to, everybody's paying income. These aren't free houses. Ponza didn't get the property for free. We're charging them for the property. They have a business to run, and so if they got 28 beds and they got 2 people from another county, you know, I think that still should be on the table. But I think if it's easy and we can, you know, understand that our obligation here is primarily Shelton, Mason County, Thurston, Kitsap, and probably any other county that touches us to the north, is probably our priority. And then they have to fill their rooms, then I don't have a problem. So that's where I'm leaning, but, you know.
Well, and I'll reiterate my remarks from last week, which I think is probably where this conversation stemmed from, which is, I think that makes the most sense, but I think that it's our obligation to protect the interests of our community members. And so to me, to say Mason County and then state of Washington gives them the capacity to make the best decision at that time. And I would hope they would use discretion and be looking at our neighbors first, but I'm perfectly comfortable with the language in the lease being as it is and leaving that to whomever's operating the property.
Okay. Other input?
It seems to me, John, that you mentioned that all they would have to do, all the veteran would have to do is live here for 90 days anyway.
Yeah, I think, and this is why when last meeting this came up, I sort of implied that, I kind of suggested to the council that we're sort of overthinking this provision.
Yeah.
We had a meeting with Ponza some time ago, and obviously we're dealing with a homeless population. So the idea that they reside in any particular county is a little bit tenuous to begin with. And so when we ask them sort of how do you figure out where someone resides, how do they establish residency, and they have sort of a myriad of ways of doing that, but one of the ways they do that is they look to sort of where they've been living around for about the last 90 days. And so if you were, and that's why like we can go around in circles about, well, how do we want to prioritize these counties? But the truth of the matter is the way this is going to operate on the ground is if someone from a faraway county comes out and hangs around in Mason County for about 90 days or so, then suddenly they're a resident in Mason County. So we can amend the lease however you want to prioritize whatever counties you want, but I think the message that I'm trying to get across is at the end of the day, the way this is going to run on the ground, it's probably not going to make that much of a difference.
Right.
And that it might be better to just leave the language as it is and let Quixote communities sort of run their project in the way that they think is best.
I strike my comments from the record.
Okay, what about Councilmember Dorsey? You okay with the lease language as is for that?
I am.
Okay, we'll leave the lease as is. Further comments, questions for staff?
I would just like to thank the public for and against this project. I've been listening to these comments for about a year now on the council, and probably a year before that as sitting in those seats. And first of all, this is for our veterans. They are vetted. You know, no drugs, no alcohol, no sex offenders. They're paying a third of their income for these homes. I think that it's a great idea. We owe it to our veterans, and I will be voting yes.
I'm going to ask that we refrain from general comments until let's get all our
Oh,
any
that's where we were.
Well, I'm not sure. I'm just clarifying, lease as written, or any other issues or questions. And then we'll have time for general comments. Councilmember Schmidt, do you have anything else?
Just put me up on the list for general comments.
Okay, we'll probably just go down the line unless
All right, sounds great.
Councilmember McDowell, have any specific to lease?
No, the questions were answered.
Okay, Deputy Mayor?
No additional questions?
Okay, decide any specific questions?
Nope.
Okay, so I'm just gonna start with Councilmember Dorsey. Is that fine with everyone, and work this way? If you have any general comments prior to our
No,
vote.
I'm good.
I'm going to say it again.
No, you're good, Councilmember Ernesco.
You know, am I next?
Yes, you are.
Well, it's just hard, you know, you're not gonna make everybody happy on all these issues. And from where I'm coming from, I've been on state level meetings, again, as I said before, with mayors from every single city in Washington state for 7 years on this subject of homelessness in general. to me, this is about the best thing there is. It is not a tent city, it's not a drug-infested whatever. It has got staff, it's got rules and regulations. Everybody's paying their share on this. And so, to me, I think it is one issue, a segment of our homeless population, and there will be other issues and other things to deal with. And that I think that this will be it is not a detriment to the community around. I really believe that anybody that's homeless right now is there without a program, without a staff, without a fence, without a home, and they are the ones where we're gonna have to deal with on a different level. This group, I think, this is one step in the right direction, and so I think that it's an asset to our community.
Okay, thank you. Do you care if I go in order? Michael,
Please.
thanks. Okay. I'm going to echo what Councilmember Nisco said. I think I appreciated everyone's comments, and I took them to heart. And you may not agree with how I vote, but I did take everyone's into consideration, from Shelton residents to people affected by this who are outside of Shelton. And I thank everyone for that. It was almost all the comments were very civil and to the point and sincerely given, and I appreciate that. And I will be supporting the lease, and the reasons I will not, that are not my reasons, I did not like the way this happened through the legislature provision, and I've made that clear to at least one representative. There is risk in this project, and I'll be honest with that. There's always risk. So there is risk for this project to our community, to the residents up there, and to our residents. So I've heard people's concern with that risk, and I really appreciate that. And to believe this is the only option for this group of people or for other groups of people, it's not the only option. This is the option that is before us, and we have to make a decision on it. I will be supporting the lease because it's a recovery housing model, and I think that's critical. The residents of the facility have to be accountable themselves, has to be accountable to Ponza and others, and have to be accountable to the city that's putting some risk out there for this facility. There's a large support base, which we saw last week. I know some of you felt outnumbered, and the veteran groups in town were very supportive of this, and I looked at those as kind of a backup to Quixote Communities, and they're going to be very supportive of this. Quixote Village has a history of safety. Our police chief talked to their law enforcement. There's always risks, but I believe we have, best we can do, we'll have a safe facility. The residents there, like Councilmember Nisco mentioned, initially they'll be drug tested. The expectation is they'll be free of substance abuse, they'll be counseled, and I'm really supportive of that in this environment, because that's the only way I think these people, our residents who have struggles like that, will succeed. And I hope that all the passion that people had for our veterans, which I know is 100%, it may not be for that location, compassion for people who are struggling with addiction, and this town is very compassionate. I hope that comes together if this goes through, and that comes together to support this community. That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
I'm going to be incredibly honest and say this has been a very difficult process for myself personally. There's been a lot of conversation wrapped up in the emotion of this. And when we get back down to it and look at the community benefit that's here, I have been swayed looking at the logic. This is not a perfect solution, but it is one solution. I think it's tapping into an available resource that otherwise we would not have access to within this community. I am incredibly concerned moving forward that we are thoughtful about how we bring this into our community and look at community by design, and make sure that this is not a project standing on its own, but that it is supported and that as we move forward and look at our plans for what we want the city to be, we're really thoughtful about how this community plays into our larger community. I had some significant concerns with the lease at the front end of this, especially regarding the community benefit and the access to that land and what else might be able to go there. Land is something that we have, is a finite resource for us, and being really realistic about what else could go on that property. Is that the right space for this? Do we have another location? What does that look like? As Bob mentioned, I think several of us were frustrated at feeling as though this project had been dropped in our laps halfway through the process, but the fact of the matter is, this is where we are, and I think that we've worked really diligently to come to the best version of this lease. And so, while I can understand a lot of the concerns and the risk, and I personally have voiced concern throughout this project, I am really happy to see that the public has gotten involved in this process, and that staff has been able to bear with us as we continue to pepper them with questions and ideas and concerns and alternate views, because ultimately, I know that all of us want a stronger Shelton. So with that, I will leave it to Kathy and Joe, but I just want to thank everyone for their part in this process, and thank you in advance for your support and understanding during this very difficult decision for all of us.
Thank you. This hasn't been a real hard decision for me. As most people know, I have this huge heart that I like bring the kitties and the dogs home and give them, you know, food and shelter. So when this project was brought up, I just got excited and got on board. And I do have some questions. They've been answered, but, and I do understand people saying not in my neighborhood, but whose neighborhood do we put it in? We have veterans that have gone and given their time and their lives and their limbs for us. And I just feel 100% that we need to be able to give back to them. Give them some protection, help them heal, get them back on their feet. And so that's where I'm coming from. Thank you.
Councilmember Schmidt?
Well, actually I spent a good amount of time putting together, it's one page, just bear with me, and I'll enter this into the record along with a copy of the Washington State Housing Trust Fund Handbook, all 118 pages of that. We can talk more. Frankly, I'm troubled that this project is going to move forward. And that is coming from the mouth of the only veteran on the council, married to a veteran. Mostly, this solution lacks community collaboration. It's based on specific problems and research in Olympia. I walked past I work in Olympia. I walked past the tent city when it was a tent city just about every day. But now we, the citizens of Shelton, the businesses in Shelton, the city council, and staff, we're now faced with making this project work in our city and for the long haul, if this is going forward. I'm not interested in doing things for the sake of doing things, or even just let's do something to get the ball rolling without doing our part in making sure that this is a good decision. Since its inception in 1986, the Housing Trust Fund has awarded almost $1 billion in funding to housing projects in the state of Washington. This project is funded by a Housing Trust Fund earmark in the capital budget. The long-term sustainment and maintenance funds are to be determined. We've heard lots of good ideas, but TBD on that. 33 years ago, the state legislature instituted the Housing Trust Fund. About a year ago, a $3 million grant was handed to Ponza, and this project was dropped in our laps. At our first retreat about a year ago, we had no idea who asked for the funding or the project. Some of us even assumed that the money was slated for the city of Shelton to pursue innovative and affordable housing options. Honestly, we still don't have a clear answer as to who asked for this project to be in our city limits. Fast forward to today, we've debated over demographics, location, eligibility requirements, term lengths, and so on. We haven't engaged the community well. We haven't spent the time truly understanding the greatest need, but yet we are quick to move to action. Quite frankly, we haven't done our homework, and I fear for the precedent that we will set. Back when the Housing Trust Fund was established, the legislature found that one of the most dramatic housing needs is that of persons needing special housing-related services, such as the mentally ill, recovering alcoholics, frail elderly persons, families with members with disabilities, and single parents. Further, quote, the legislature finds that housing assistance programs in the past have often failed to help those in greatest need. I ask you, who are those people in the city of Shelton? What is the purpose of the Housing Trust Fund? Its purpose is surely not to pit groups of homeless people against other groups of homeless people. We have successfully completed that. Its purpose is to not be leveraged to circumvent policy and surely not to be used as political capital. The purpose of the Housing Trust Fund is to make funds available for affordable housing projects through a competitive application process. In closing, I hope we can all learn from this to better engage the community we serve and work towards truly understanding problems before we move towards action and advocacy.
Thank you, Joe. Any further comments? Okay, we have a motion on the floor in a second. The motion was to approve the lease as written.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to raise a point of personal preference and have the city clerk call the roll for this vote.
Sure. Okay. So the motion that we're voting on is approve the lease as written, as presented. So we will call the roll.
Okay. Councilmember Dorsey?
Aye.
Councilmember Inesco?
Aye.
Councilmember Kranz?
Aye.
Mayor Rogers?
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Peterson?
Aye.
Councilmember McDowell?
Aye.
Councilmember Schmidt?
No.
Thank you, council, and all involved in this. It's been a long process. Staff, citizens, associated groups, so thank everyone for their due diligence in this.
Yeah.
Okay, with that, I believe we move on to general public comment number 2.
I don't have any
Okay.
comments.
So on to city manager report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, members of the public. Just briefly, did want to mention again that we'll be happy to welcome our new Director of Financial Services next Monday. Looking very much forward to having him on board. Mr. B. Miller be here, and we'll get to work on a lot of the budget retreats that some of you mentioned during your council reports. The other thing I wanted to mention is we are going to have a program on a Wednesday night. We'll be doing biannually throughout the year. The first of those events will be held on May 1st, and it's called Spotlight Shelton. We will be having a community event. The first part of that will focus on code compliance issues and let people know what's going on here and what the city's looking at. And then an opportunity for citizens of Shelton to discuss anything they'd like with members of staff of all departments will be at the Spotlight Shelton. So we'll be holding those twice a year. The next one will probably be sometime near Halloween, either right before or right after. And that's all I have. Be happy to answer any questions.
Well, I just think we do need to acknowledge, we have a new city employee over here, we should acknowledge her, so.
We do, and she will be formally introduced at our next meeting, but happy to introduce Leandra. No, that's fine. She's here getting the lay of the land, but too bad she can't get her on camera. But Leandra Sharp is here, and she'll be helping Donna with clerk's duties and attending some of these meetings. And if Donna ever asks for a vacation, we'll see, now that she's got a backup.
Any other questions for City Manager Knighton? Okay, any other issues for the good of the order? Okay. City council meeting's adjourned. Our next meeting will be Tuesday, April 16th at 6 PM.